XRP is setting up for a potential macro breakout. In this video, we're going to take a look at the likelihood of that happening in the near term. We'll also take a look at some potential upside targets, some pullback and consolidation areas within the range that it's currently trading in, as well as the dreaded breakdown. Now, let's jump right into it. It's the monthly time frame that is really interesting to me because we do see this area of support that was flipped into resistance back here in September of 2022 was retested in last month's candle. Beautiful close on last month's candle, setting this prior consolidation low into an actual major low. We have two major lows within the range, so it'd be natural to test up. If it can close above this 55 to 56 cent area on a monthly, I do think that things go for quite a run up. And in this case, I would actually be looking to the next big area to the upside around 90 cents. But this is from a monthly perspective. So the lower term timeframes are going to find resistance in other areas on the way up. But if XRP can actually get a monthly closure above here, would look really good. And then maybe even retest this 55 to 56 cent area as support and see what happens from there. Maybe we can start targeting some of those really big targets or impulsive targets to the upside. The downside areas are just going to be the consolidation lows. If that 28 cents is lost, we most likely see XRP take a dive down below the 20 cent region overall to retest the actual macro lows from 2020 in this case. And even that wick low coming in just below 20 cents there in late 2020 into 2021. So that is something to be aware of, but I do think that as it stands right now with the structure that's being built, there is more potential for upside than there is for massive or catastrophic downside. Now, that being said, we should check on a few different things here. Let's take a look at Stoke, and Stoke looks pretty good. It's working its way out of the oversold zone, and it has a monthly pivot at 36 cents for Stoke here. Now, that is within range. If we take a look here, the actual candle open, and this would also be the candle close. So we got the candle close from February to the open in March is right there at 37 cents. So 37 and a half, a little bit above there on the actual close open structure. That's going to be pretty darn important because if that area to the downside is lost, then momentum on the monthly will begin to turn down. We can also see when looking at RSI here, forgive my voice, I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of trouble with allergies here. But we can see that on the RSI, we have seen these two drives of hidden bullish divergence begin to play out. And we've seen RSI pop up to the midline here, which is around 52 cents. And if it's going to head back, the most likely area for it to head back down to from a monthly perspective would be around the signal line. And the signal line just happens to be at 38 cents here. So big important area at March's open. So keep that in mind as we go forward in this analysis. Let's go ahead and throw on some volatility metrics here. So I'm going to throw on my indicator and I'm going to point out a few things here. First things first, we got to look at where the basis band is, and it's pretty easily identifiable. And it's right at the prior month's wick high there, coming in at 58 cents. So that would mean that if XRP can break out above this resistance, this local resistance, and it's a pretty major resistance there on the monthly time frame at this 55 to 56 cents, I would actually be raising my targets up to in and around the first standard deviation on the monthly, which is coming in at 82 cents, which is very close to the close open structure of this lower high that came in on March and into April of 2022. The wick highs there, I would expect to get tested, probably first pass rejection, just like we see around these wick highs here of the current consolidation. And that's up at that 91 cents. So something to be aware of there. That's a big area right there at that basis band. So if we do see closures above there, I think that XRP is going to take a nice trip to the upside. And when we kind of extrapolate this out into some of the lower term timeframes, like the weekly, we can also see that the weekly is doing something that, I've talked about in other long form videos and that I talk about in my shorts videos a lot. And that is it's hitting these targets on the Bollinger Bands. And in this case, it's finding resistance where at the upper third standard deviation. But the neat thing is here is we've saw quite a contraction in the Bollinger Bands. And we saw the nice move up on the monthly in March, or on the weekly rather, in this was March 20th. So yeah, this was fairly recent. I have not been keeping up with XRP, I'll be quite honest, but it is very interesting to me now because of where it's coming in on its monthly levels. Now, the move up in late March, yeah, this was late March, closing above the second standard deviation is expanding the Bollinger Bands, in this case to the upside. We did see one quick closure outside of it in late March, last week of March, and a wick high there as denoted by the triangle and the purple dot. So this, to me, is telling me that the volatility is increasing to the upside. And we can actually see that with the volatility metric down here, BBWP. We see that BBWP is over the moving average here. In this case, BBWP is at 30.55%, and the moving average is at 15.8%. So we can also see this by the increasing volatility of the bands. And in this case, we're above the basis band, so we're increasing volatility to the upside. Now, any closures that can maintain above this upper first standard deviation, which is at 44 cents, going to look really, really good for trending strength. If XRP can stay above there, that would be the preferred area that you'd want to see hold, is wherever that first standard deviation is coming into the upside. Now, even better, and we'll get more volatility expansion to the upside here, is the upper second standard deviation, and that's coming in at 50 cents. If XRP can hold above there, the Bollinger Bands will more aggressively expand. In this case, they'll more aggressively expand to the upside here, thus getting that upper third standard deviation further up as well. And what that does is that will most likely expand the upper third standard deviation to in and around this resistance right here. We don't often see closures outside of the upper third standard deviation. Usually they're wicks. But when you see nice volatility contraction like this, you will get a closure or two outside of that upper third standard deviation. So that's actually something I'm going to be watching this week. So it looks like a little bit of a sideways week in between the upper second and third standard deviations here. So I want to see how it closes this week and how it opens next week. Now, that being said, if the basis band is dropped on a weekly, we're testing that big monthly area around that 37 cents to 36 cents, which is also the momentum pivot and the simple moving average on the RSI for the monthly. So keep that in mind. Big, big area. If that area is dropped, I do think that XRP goes from one side of the Bollinger Bands down to the other to test. So that would just beget, in my opinion, more consolidation within this range. But if things did start to close below that wick low at 28, almost 29 cents, I'd be very aware that things are probably going to dive down to that 20 cent region. When looking at the daily, we see that, well, looks pretty darn good. We got nice volatility expansion here of the Bollinger Bands, so nice expansion to the upside. And in a strong trending move, this is what I was talking about. You want to see things stay above on a close, that first standard deviation. That allows it allows price to keep expanding in that upside direction and maintaining that momentum. And then we see now coming back, or mean reverting back down to the basis band. And the basis band is right here at 48.46 cents. So if it can regain the upper first standard deviation, we can see that it's probably going to run that upper second standard deviation, which is right there at the resistance again. So retest its local highs, and would even have the potential to trade above there to the upper third standard deviation. But because the Bollinger Bands are now went from pretty contracted to pretty expanded rather, that does tell me that would most likely be a wick until we see a little bit more consolidation. If we did see it just plow on through, it's probably going to be a pretty harsh snapback in those lower term timeframes back to search for support. And it's most likely going to be local structural support in and around these local highs. So that being said, if the basis band does fail there at 48.46, I would be looking to the lower first standard deviation to maintain this upside trend. If it did not find support there, it's probably going to run all the way back down to the lower second and lower third standard deviations around this very critical monthly area at that 37 cents. So that's what I'm going to be watching for and waiting for, is really, can XRP close above this upper first standard deviation again at 52.81? So 52.81 cents. I would say if it does, it's going to retest this area, and that's when things are going to really, really get interesting. And this might depend on the market at wide, that being Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other cryptos, kind of moving through some of their local resistances as well. So If they do, I would actually expect XRP to do the same. And because it's such a critical area, XRP could find itself in a situation where it's just ripping to the upside. That would be good for those in long positions and for those who are heavily invested in it. But be aware, on the other side of that, it's still in a consolidation and it has a wide range that it can consolidate in. So that is something that you do need to bear in mind. When looking at momentum on the daily, we do see that momentum is down. Obviously, it is down in the context of an uptrend. So when this does turn up, we would get momentum divergences as well in many cases if the uptrend is still intact. This is going to be pivoted at, let's see, 52, almost 53 cents. So 53 cents, that would be above the first standard deviation there. So if you do see price testing up above there, momentum would start to shift on the daily for Stoke. For the the upside and the downside here on RSI, it's in an area where it's kind of, it's got the potential to create some bullish divergence, but when it does pop up again, there's probably going to be some bearish divergence on the other side. So with that being said, if you want to see this head up and it does get closures above that 55 to 58 cent region on any bear divs, you want to see the local structure consolidations hold to that actual monthly level. And that would, maybe later on then try to, if it's holding those levels later on, then try to pump up past the local highs. The momentum is also still looking okay on the weekly, I believe. So this should still have legs. Yeah. Above 46.54. So that's, that's pretty good actually, because that would give it some room to come and test the basis band on the daily. So now, where could things potentially go from here on the more macro timeframes? If this ends up being a macro breakout, and it might not happen right away, so we do want to get some confluence with some of those key levels that we just talked about. And in this case, we can pull the entire range here to see where we have fibs coming in. And we do have, some key areas there at the 1272, but more importantly, what we might want to do is just pull the current move. Then we can get some pullback targets as well. So from the low to the high, we have that big area, guess what, at that almost 48 cents, which, as we just saw, is going to be right around that basis band. So just underneath that basis band is where the 618 is of this entire move up. And we can see that the one spot extension, of course, is coming right in between that upper second and third standard deviation on the daily. And we have some areas of interest if we scroll left here. Yeah, the 1272 coming right in because we've already tested this low structure here. Let's go ahead and get rid of the bands for a moment. And you can see that the 888 to the one spot structure right here is coming right in line with that monthly resistance level. And that's already been tested. We saw that this was also the breakdown level where, we broke down on the daily and went all the way down to that 28 cent region. So big level. Once that's gotten above, the 1272 is going to be the primary area to look to. And that's going to be at 66 cents. And then the 1414 coming right in this bottom side structure at around 70 cents. 1618 to 1786, pretty well clear. I mean, there is highs here, but there's only one minor high. Typically on the 1618, you're going to get pullbacks anyway if it is going to get extension up. But that's really going to be about the 1272, that 66 to 70 cent region. If you do see a breakout above 55 to 56 cents. And if it does pull back there, you want to see 55, 56 cents hold up as support for a valid retest. And to that downside, the biggest area to really watch out for is on this particular pull, the 50% fib is coming right in, a little bit of consolidation. You see lift off to the new high here after going sideways, getting a bit of a falling channel structure, getting that impulsive move up initially, coming back down for support, and then the 50% fib right there at 44 cents It's going to be very important. That would be very important all the way across the board for this range. As you can see that the other high structure from late last year is up here and was holding that 50% fib. So upside, got to break 55 to 56 cents, potential to go up to around that 60 to, mid 60s to 70 cent region, and possibly further over time up to that 91 cent region if things can close well on a monthly time frame. To the downside, anything that kind of loses that 618 is probably going to take a trip and retest in and around the 50% fib here, around that 44 cents. Really need to see it stay above this area here, 37 cents. That's going to be the big line in the sand to the downside. All right, that's going to do it for me today. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening, no matter where you are in the world. Please trade safe and stay safe. With all of that being said, Landy out.